Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from AnthonyMorganti.com. Welcome to my video series, The Filters of Aurora HDR 2018. In this video, we're going to take a look at the color toning filter that's found in Aurora HDR 2018. And as I've mentioned about many of the other filters that are in Aurora HDR 2018, Lightroom has a similar tool. In Lightroom, there's a tab called Split Toning. And split toning in Lightroom is pretty much the same thing as color toning in Aurora HDR 2018. So if you have watched any of my Lightroom videos where I cover split toning, you're going to be very familiar with the color toning filter. The color toning filter allows you to, as the name implies, tone your image a specific color. And more specifically than that, you could actually tone the highlights one way and the shadows a different way. And then you could control how much of the highlights or shadows might dominate the image, or the tone that you applied to the highlights and the tone you applied to the shadows dominate over one another. And I'll explain that more as I go. That might have sounded a little complicated. So usually what many people use the color toning filter for is for creative expression. They want to give their image a specific look, be it a cool look, a warm look, or maybe they want to give it an old film noir feel. They want to give it a specific type of film look, and you could accomplish that with the color toning filter. And to demonstrate it, I'm going to use this image here, and we're going to give this image like an old film look. And the way I pre-process the image in Aurora HDR 2018 is, for this specific old film look, is I first of all brought up the highlights quite a bit because I want their skin to be very, very bright. I don't want a lot of color in their skin, because the film look I'm going for is one that didn't have a lot of color in it. So I brought saturation down quite a bit. You can see saturation's at -37. So two adjustments so far: highlights up, saturation down. Then I jumped down to the tone curve and I added a slight S curve to add some contrast. And that's really all I've done to the image so far. So we're going to add this kind of old film look to it. Now, as you look at the color toning filter, you'll see that there's 6 different sliders. The main sliders we're going to talk about first are highlights and shadows. There's 2 sliders in each section. And this is where you are actually able to tone the highlights one color and the shadows a different color. So if I jump down to highlights and I go to saturation and I just push that all the way up, you can see how it gave a specific kind of hue tone to the highlights. And I could move the hue slider around and change the tone through yellow, greens, purples, magenta, and cyan all the way through. So we could really dial in a tone for those highlights. Similarly, if I jump down to shadows, I could do the exact same thing. I'll bring saturation all the way up and we'll move hue across, and you can see where the shadows, the darker parts of the image, are now getting a hue applied to them. So kind of a tone. So we're going right across. Now, there's all different things, as I mentioned, you could do with this. And what I want to do is give it kind of an old film look. And often in old film, we have a lack of color. And that's what I did with saturation, bringing that down. Also, there's not a lot of dynamic range in film. So I brought the whites, or the highlights, I clipped those a little bit by turning highlights up. Now I want to give a little bit of a tone to those highlights, and often the tone will be a yellowish orange. So I'm going to turn up saturation first so I could see what I'm doing, and then I'm going to move the hue slider to the right. And you see there's a little color swatch here to help you see what color you're actually dialing in. And it helps to have saturation all the way up. And I'm just going to bring it up till we got a yellowish orange tint. It doesn't really, it's not rocket science. You don't have to get exact number 53 or anything like that. Just Do it till you see what looks like it might be right. Then bring saturation down to something that looks a little more realistic, maybe around 28. Then we're going to jump down to shadows, and often in this old film look, the shadows have a bluish purplish tint. So we're going to take saturation all the way up, and we're going to move hue to the right until we get that bluish purplish tint, probably somewhere around 246. And then we'll bring saturation down till it looks a little more natural. Now, here's a before and after. I'll click on this little eyeball. There's before and there's after. Now you can see it's pretty subtle. We could bring saturation up a little more maybe if we want to really intensify the look. There's before, there's after, before, after. I think the saturation on my highlights are still a little high, so I'm going to bring that down. Before and after. So you see it's a real subtle look, but it gives that kind of film look that we might have got if we used, Ektachrome back in the day or something like that, and got this kind of, old school look. So you could do quite a bit. Now there's two other sliders we haven't talked about, amount and shadows, or this one here, balance, I'm sorry. Now amount obviously is just kind of like a volume control for the whole tool. If you turn it all the way down, nothing happened. You won't see any change in the before and after. So you could dial in a lot of saturation, say, and a lot more, or a lot of saturation for both the highlights and the shadows, and then maybe bring amount down until it's more to your liking. Now the balance slider, which do you want more to dominate or bleed into the midtones? Do you want the shadow color to bleed into the midtones? If so, then move this way. Or if you want the highlights to more dominate, then you could go to the right. So you could balance it out a little bit. This comes in handy for images that have, let's say, a predominance of brighter tones. You might prefer to have this balance more towards those brighter tones, or vice versa. Maybe for whatever you're trying to achieve creatively, you'd want to move it one way or the other. Or if you have an image that has a lot more darker tones in it, then you could move this balance slider around to make it look just a little more acceptable to your eye. So that's the color toning filter that's available in Aurora HDR 2018. Thank you, everyone that watches my videos. I truly do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.